Forget everything you think you know about Drew's shooter. The truth is darker, pettier, and sitting right inside Michael's house. Apparently, the mansion's security system doubles as modern art, admired but useless. How else could Willow slip in repeatedly, pilfer a gun, shoot Drew, and still have enough composure to sneak back and return it like a borrowed library book? Unfortunately for her, Chase caught her mid-return, and Michael, ever the observant enabler, saw her leaving Drew's house. He knows she did it, but naturally, his solution isn't justice. It's strategy. Michael's carefully orchestrated, therapist-supervised visits aren't about family healing. They're groundwork for an insanity plea. A professional on record, a tidy diagnosis of temporary madness, and voila, Ferncliff instead of Pentonville. Michael, the smooth operator, is protecting Willow not from guilt, but from consequences. He's already witnessed her unraveling with Daisy and Sasha, and now he's packaging her instability into a legal safety net. It's the most compassionate brand of manipulation one could ask for. Meanwhile, Carly remains the most maddeningly likable hurricane in Port Charles. She meddles without apology, charges into chaos head first, and somehow makes it all look like moral conviction. When her heart inevitably shatters, it will be a masterclass in poetic justice. And Jocelyn? She's about to learn the fine art of eating one's words, proof that every self-righteous speech eventually boomerangs back with interest. As for Jack and Carly, they're the perfect cautionary tale. Transparency addict meets secret hoarder. Their chemistry burns bright, but the relationship is destined to implode under the weight of its own contradictions. Still, they're an oddly satisfying pair, if only because their downfall will be spectacular. Elsewhere, Vaughn's affiliation with the WSB sent unnecessary ripples through Carly's circle. Ironic, considering her entanglement with Jack makes espionage practically a family pastime. And then there's Nathan, who's returned from the dead, or cloning lab, depending on the day. The amnesia, the convenient reappearance, Brit's cryptic project. It's all very October in Port Charles, when the ghosts clock in, and the living start to doubt their own sanity. If Nathan truly is who he claims, then Port Charles has one more miracle on its overcrowded resurrection roster. If not, James might need therapy before Michael's therapist is even done diagnosing Willow. Either way, someone had better call Spinelli, because in this town, even the dead deserve a background check. They brought a soap legend back from retirement and gave her a storyline about mail. There are few pleasures soap fans savor more than watching a legend return to the screen. Seeing Erica Slezak on General Hospital should have been one of those moments, a triumphant reappearance of a daytime icon. Instead, it feels like a master violinist invited to a kazoo recital. The performance is elegant as ever, but the material? It barely deserves her time. Slezak's new character, Veronica Ronnie Bard, arrives in Port Charles under a cloud of mystery that should be thrilling. Unfortunately, the execution has all the flair of a misplaced envelope. Literally. The storyline hinges on handwritten letters in an age when even mobsters use encrypted texts. The show's insistence on analog communication isn't charmingly retro, it's absurd. The theory mill surrounding Ronnie is in full spin. Some believe she's an honest woman with integrity. Others suspect a con artist working Martin's latest revenge plot against Tracy. The problem? The timeline doesn't add up. The will revision predates the mysterious letter, and no amount of soap logic makes that puzzle fit. Still, at least Ronnie can hold her own against Tracy, which is more than can be said for most newcomers. And yet, something about Ronnie doesn't quite land. Her introduction feels abrupt, as if the writers dropped her into the Quartermain chaos with no preamble and hoped nostalgia would fill in the blanks. It doesn't. She's a stranger in a house built on decades of family dysfunction, and that disconnect is hard to ignore. Slezak's performance, while competent, hasn't yet reached the masterclass some fans claim. If not for her One Life to Live pedigree, this portrayal might barely register. The talent is undeniable, but the direction and writing confine her to a series of awkward stares and excessive head tilts, choices that make her seem more uncertain than enigmatic. The fan base itself is torn between gratitude and exasperation. On one hand, seeing Slezak again is a treat. On the other, this storyline feels like a colossal waste of her. General Hospital could have given her a role worthy of her history and craft. Instead, we get a convoluted inheritance plot that might end with Ronnie signing over Monica's house to Michael and vanishing into the ether. The likely payoff? None. Unless this is Monica's posthumous gotcha aimed at Tracy, the entire exercise is dramatically pointless. Speculation runs wild. Is Ronnie truly Monica's long-lost sister? Is she an imposter? Or, soap gods help us, is she secretly Jason's biological mother? The retcon gymnastics are enough to make one dizzy. The writer's attempts to rewrite Monica's already fragile backstory strain both logic and memory. Even the timeline of their supposed childhood separation contradicts Monica's established history. What does work is the on-screen chemistry between Slezak and Jane Elliott. Watching two veterans spar feels like a rare reminder of what soaps once were: sharp, theatrical, and unapologetically grand. The scenes between Ronnie and Tracy are the only moments where this plot flickers with life. For longtime fans, Slezak's presence is comforting, a link to daytime television's golden era. But nostalgia can only carry a story so far. Ronnie Bard's debut should have been a triumph, a mature, layered role for a legendary actress. Instead, it's a patchwork of fan theories, narrative contradictions, and baffling creative choices. If General Hospital had any sense, it would solidify Ronnie as Monica's legitimate sister and give Slezak recurring visits steeped in real Quartermain drama, not stationary-based nonsense. Because wasting Erica Slezak on a plot about forged wills and postal intrigue is not just disappointing, it's downright disrespectful. Port Charles forgives murderers, mobsters, and serial liars, but not Britt Westbourne. Why is that? Britt Westbourne that once strutted through Port Charles with unapologetic venom and a flair for precision strikes. The Britch wasn't whining her way through her woes, she was weaponizing them. She was smart, sharp-tongued, and gloriously self-aware. But somewhere between resurrection and redemption, the fire dimmed. Now, instead of a powerhouse in heels, she's become the town's favorite emotional dartboard, sniping from the sidelines while everyone lines up to remind her she's lucky to be breathing. The current Brit is less unapologetic queen and more whiny deflector. The once fearsome schemer who could verbally eviscerate an opponent now spends her time taking potshots at Jason and Carly, as if sarcasm alone could substitute for character development. Watching her berate Jason for daring to help her, after she faked her own death, no less, isn't strength. It's petulance. The problem isn't Kelly Thiebaud's performance. She delivers every line with impeccable timing and screen command. The problem is the writing, which keeps Britt spinning her wheels in place, while the plot waits for November sweeps to give her something, anything to do. Jason, meanwhile, is left in a holding pattern of emotional constipation. Once upon a time, old Jason would have flattened anyone who so much as looked sideways at the women he cared about. Now he's half confessor, half doormat, begging Britt to come clean about her mysterious 5 poppies past while she mocks him for ruining her paradise. One can only hope the man's patience qualifies as sainthood, because it certainly isn't romantic tension. It's not just Britt. The show has developed a bad habit of taking dynamic women and reducing them to single traits. Lulu came out of her coma as a blank slate. Cody arrived with no clear direction, and now Britt, once a layered anti-heroine, is penned into a corner of recycled snark and stunted growth. The audience deserves better than another woman written into misery while Carly saunters through town collecting plot armor. Yes, Britt is abrasive. Yes, she's defensive. But when everyone in Port Charles greets her resurrection with pitchforks while giving habitual offenders like Carly perpetual absolution, her bitterness starts to make sense. In a city where moral amnesia is an epidemic, Britt's biggest sin seems to be refusing to grovel. What she needs isn't another round of pity or punishment, it's purpose. Let her own her flaws, but give her fire back. Let her be dangerous, clever, unpredictable. The Britch who clawed her way into relevance, not the ghost of her former glory. Until then, she's just another wasted paycheck with excellent delivery. Don't let the badge fool you. Jack Brennan isn't a hero. He's just Sonny with government funding. Jack Brennan seems to have mastered the ancient soap opera art of wanting his cake and eating it too. Unfortunately for him, Carly Spencer has never been known for her forgiving palate. When the truth about his lies finally surfaces, and it will, she won't simply cut him a slice of justice, she'll feed it to him with a forked tongue. The entire mess is almost poetic in its hypocrisy. Brennan's defenders argue that secrecy is part of his job, that Carly knew what she was signing up for when she dated a man whose business card might as well read professional liar. Fair enough, except Brennan didn't just keep secrets. He deliberately weaponized Jocelyn's grief to turn her into a killer, then used that crime to draft her into the WSB. That's not confidentiality. That's manipulation of the highest order, one that conveniently served his own agenda. And yet, in true Port Charles fashion, the moral lines are blurry. Sonny's decades-long saga of lies, violence, and betrayal has somehow earned him a criminal but lovable reputation in Carly's heart. She's forgiven him countless times, mostly because they share children, history, and an endless supply of excuses. But Brennan is not Sonny, and this relationship lacks the messy emotional scaffolding that once held her together with the mob boss. There's no revenge, no jealousy, no mutual self-destruction, just a woman who believed she'd found a clean slate, and a man who smeared it with espionage. The irony is thick enough to cut with a WSB-issued knife. Carly long ago accepted Sonny's brand of danger as the cost of love, but she seems allergic to Brennan's. The mob may have endangered her children, but at least it never conscripted them into federal service. Brennan crossed a sacred line when he dragged Joss into his operation, under duress, no less. For all of Sonny's moral bankruptcy, even he drew that boundary. Of course, hypocrisy is hardly unique to Brennan. Valentine lied to Anna while claiming undying love. Nina married Sonny while hiding her own crimes. Drew recited vows to Willow after blackmailing a nurse. Portia walked down the aisle, concealing Trina's paternity. Dishonesty in Port Charles is practically a local dialect, but Brennan's sins carry an extra dose of self-righteousness. He doesn't just deceive, he convinces himself it's noble. Carly's defenders insist she's finally being authentic in this relationship. Unfortunately, authenticity means little when paired with a man who manufactures evidence, blackmails young women, and manipulates grief like a trained puppeteer. Brennan's actions weren't noble sacrifices for duty. They were strategic power plays to protect his interests. Even Jason, the eternal loyalist, was a pawn in his game without realizing it. And yet, one can almost guarantee the inevitable. Carly will rage, throw glassware, and deliver a few impassioned monologues before deciding that perhaps she was too hard on him. After all, Port Charles women have a talent for forgiving men who make them look like fools. Still, this betrayal feels different, sharper, deeper, impossible to sweep under the rug of romantic justification. When the truth finally detonates, Brennan's smirk will vanish faster than a WSB file marked classified. Whether Carly actually learns from it or simply repeats her time-honored cycle of outrage and amnesia remains the only real suspense left in this increasingly absurd espionage melodrama. At least one thing is certain. She was warned. And if she forgives him anyway, no one should be surprised when the next disaster arrives, wrapped, as always, in charm, deceit, and a handsome smile. Everyone's blaming Michael, but what if the shooter wasn't an adult at all? Here's the shocking theory General Hospital doesn't want you to believe, that Drew Cain's own daughter might have pulled the trigger. There are few things more gloriously absurd than a Port Charles whodunit, and Drew Cain's shooting is no exception. What began as a crime has quickly devolved into a town-wide guessing game where every resident, from a vengeful child to an underused ADA, is a suspect. The theories are multiplying faster than Jason's secret children, and the collective chaos is, frankly, a work of art. At the heart of the hysteria lies the most divisive theory: Scout, Drew's daughter, as the shooter. It's both horrifying and morbidly poetic. the emotionally neglected child turning on her father in a fit of grief and resentment. Supporters of this theory point to motive, Drew's emotional cruelty and family alienation, and opportunity, no forced entry, an eerily convenient ringtone, and an uncanny calmness during the chaos. Naturally, others find this notion impossible. After all, she loves her father. But in Port Charles, love and attempted murder are practically synonyms. Still, the Scout theory manages to stand out precisely because it's just believable enough to sting. Soap writers have never been shy about testing the boundaries of good taste, and a child with a gun, driven by neglect, would certainly send social media into meltdown. The "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" ringtone clue feels tailor-made for melodrama. It's sentimental, creepy, and conveniently symbolic, exactly the kind of overwrought storytelling that General Hospital specializes in. Of course, there's the ever-growing list of alternate suspects, because no soap mystery is complete without one. Willow, perpetually trembling with repressed rage and half-finished confessions, has emerged as a top contender. Her scenes with Drew drip with nervous energy, suggesting that she either shot him or deeply wishes she had. Michael, meanwhile, skulks about with his usual air of moral superiority, giving everyone reason to suspect he knows more than he's saying, which, to be fair, is standard Michael procedure. Some fans prefer more colorful culprits, ADA Turner, because corruption in Port Charles law enforcement is less a twist than a lifestyle. Selena Wu, because nothing spices up a sweeps month like a glamorous crime lord. Or Monica, whose hypothetical act of matricidal symmetry would be Shakespearean brilliance. But alas, soap writers rarely embrace that level of boldness. The secondary debate, where poor Scout should live once her family inevitably implodes, is a subplot in itself. Alexis is deemed too ethically compromised, having dabbled in light hostage-taking and drugging. Molly, apparently the only adult in the family not teetering on the brink of felony, emerges as the consensus choice for custody. It's a low bar, but in the Davis household, not a criminal this week, counts as moral high ground. Meanwhile, others have noticed a strange synchronicity between General Hospital and Days of Our Lives storylines, the theory being that both soaps are feeding identical prompts into an AI to generate fresh ideas. Given that both shows recently staged child shooter storylines and spy revivals, it's hard to dismiss. The resemblance is uncanny enough to make one wonder if the true culprit isn't Scout, but an overworked script generator. In the end, Drew's shooting feels less like a mystery and more like an experiment in audience endurance. Whether it's a grief-stricken child, a frazzled nurse, or a rogue ADA behind the trigger, the real crime here is the writing itself, predictably chaotic, oddly familiar, and stretched to fill the November sweeps. But as every GH fan knows, logic is optional, melodrama is mandatory. So, who shot Drew Cain? Possibly Scout? Probably Willow. Definitely the writers. Monica Quartermaine didn't just leave behind a will, she left a bomb. And it looks like she's still manipulating her family from beyond the grave. Leave it to General Hospital to turn an inheritance into a full-scale psychological thriller, with relish, no less. What began as another tedious will reading has now spiraled into a carnival of deception, nostalgia, and questionable legality. The entire Ronnie inheriting the mansion fiasco has managed to both irritate and intrigue fans, which is exactly the kind of chaos Monica Quartermaine would have adored. At first glance, the premise sounds absurd enough to be deliberate. Monica leaving the estate to her supposed long-lost sister, Veronica Ronnie Bard, rather than to any of her actual descendants, feels like one last masterstroke of Quartermaine mischief. After all, who better to deliver a final blow to Tracy than Monica herself, from beyond the grave? The bizarre legal setup, Alexis's conveniently absent involvement, the missing family attorney, and that bizarre bottle of relish all screams setup. If this is Monica's ultimate prank, it's an exquisitely tailored one. Still, even for Monica, such a cruel joke would be cutting it close. Depriving her family home from her children and grandchildren would tarnish her legacy far more than it would tickle her sense of irony. The only thing worse would be if she truly did intend this nonsense. And frankly, Monica was never that petty. The wild card, of course, is Ronnie herself. Depending on who's theorizing, she's either Monica's secret sister, a con artist recruited by Martin, a plant from the mysterious Hummingbird brothers, yes, that's apparently a thing now, or simply a well-meaning outsider caught in Quartermaine madness. Theories abound that Ronnie was a waitress-turned-lawyer, that Martin rewrote the will to spite Tracy, that Ronnie and Alexis are in on a practical joke. Even that Sonny, because why not, engineered the entire thing as a strategic diversion. At this point, the only thing missing is a seance. Erica Slezak's arrival, as Ronnie has added a touch of soap royalty to the proceedings. But her presence only deepens the ambiguity. Is she genuine, or is she playing the role of her life? The intentionality in her dialogue, the calm acceptance amid Quartermaine chaos, none of it reads as accidental. If this woman is an imposter, she studied her role well. Meanwhile, the Quartermaines themselves are behaving suspiciously sane. Michael, Jason, and the rest seem bizarrely resigned to losing the family estate, while Tracy, the one person guaranteed to blow a gasket, is conveniently preoccupied with kicking everyone out of her house. Olivia, bless her carb-loving heart, appears more concerned with the pizza oven than the property deed. Somewhere, Alan is rolling in his grave. The most plausible explanation? Monica orchestrated this entire charade with Ronnie to test her family, or perhaps to protect them. By muddying the ownership of the mansion, she may have shielded the property from Drew's corporate scheming or outside seizure. A posthumous chess move to ensure her home remains, in spirit, under Quartermaine control. It's the kind of convoluted brilliance that defines both Monica and GH at its best. And then there's Martin Gray, ever the opportunist. He's been quietly pocketing letters, whispering to Drew, and generally behaving like a man with far too many irons in the fire. Whether he's working for or against Tracy remains to be seen, but his fingerprints are all over this forgery fiasco. Of course, it wouldn't be General Hospital without tangents about Hummingbird cake, fictional brothers, or fan-favorite cameos. The idea of Kim Zimmer showing up next as the real Veronica Bard might be the most delightfully meta thing the show could do. Still, beneath the chaos lies something rare, a storyline with genuine suspense, legacy weight, and character-driven intrigue. In the end, whether Ronnie is real, fake, or reincarnated, one thing is certain: the Quartermaines will once again turn their own dysfunction into high art. And when the dust settles, after all the fake wills, family feuds, and pastry metaphors, it wouldn't be surprising to hear Tracy, exasperated and victorious, finally declare, "It's my house, Monica gave it to me." Because in Port Charles, it always comes back to the same truth. No one ever really dies. No one ever really tells the truth. And no one, under any circumstances, gives up the Quartermaine mansion without a fight. Everyone's talking about who pulled the trigger on Drew, but no one's asking what Michael was really doing there. In true General Hospital fashion, a single gunshot has detonated a web of lies, alibis, and absurdly suspicious coincidences. The night Drew Kane was shot is now less a crime scene and more a social Rorschach test. Everyone sees what they want to see, but through all the chaos, one question cuts through. What exactly does Michael Corinthos know, and what was he doing at Drew's house that night? Let's start with the facts, or the fragments of them we've been given. Michael was seen leaving Drew's the night of the shooting, his presence confirmed by Tracy, who caught him slipping into his car. Yet no one has bothered to explain why he was there, what he saw, or why he left. The writers clearly want this dangling thread to hum with tension. After all, if Michael were guilty, it would make no sense to reveal his presence so early. Besides, a man that meticulous wouldn't use a weapon traced to his own family, leave a wounded victim breathing, or forget to concoct an airtight alibi. So, if Michael isn't the shooter, what does he know? The prevailing suspicion is that he saw something, or someone, and has been quietly protecting that person ever since. If the shooter were one of the PCPD's suspects, Michael's silence would make sense only if the culprit were someone close to him. Carly, Curtis, or perhaps Willow. Nina, of course, would get no such loyalty. But if Michael thinks he knows who did it, that opens an entirely different can of melodramatic worms. Suppose he heard gunshots, saw Trina and Kai fleeing the scene, and jumped to conclusions. Given his history of misplaced self-righteousness, it wouldn't be the first time he crowned himself judge and protector all in one breath. Then there's the ever-entertaining Scout theory, a deliciously deranged fan favorite. According to this version, Drew's young daughter snapped under the strain of paternal neglect and restrictive custody orders, armed herself with Edward's gun, and shot her father in a fit of grief and rage. Outlandish? Certainly. But General Hospital has never been accused of subtlety. The only real flaw in this theory is geography. Scout hasn't had access to the Quartermain mansion, making her acquisition of Edward's firearm improbable at best. Far more plausible is the mounting case against Willow. The clues, her unstable behavior, her manipulations, her sudden supervised visitation with a therapist, are practically screaming temporary insanity plea. The shadowy shooter's silhouette reportedly matched her haircut, and Drew's first words upon waking, "Is Willow okay?" felt less like concern and more like recognition. If Willow did shoot Drew, the question becomes whether she acted in a psychotic break or full awareness. The evidence tilts toward the latter. She has demonstrated complete memory and intent in every scheme she's pulled, from sabotaging Sasha to gaslighting Daisy. Willow may be unwell, but she isn't delusional. Her crimes have purpose. And Michael? He may know it all. His quiet intensity, his sudden reappearance at Elizabeth's house, his cryptic demeanor, every gesture screams damage control. Whether he's hiding the gun, planting it to frame Willow, or trying to obscure someone else's involvement, his actions reek of calculated desperation. Carly's smug exit from Elizabeth's home only deepens the suspicion that the Corinthos family is knee-deep in a cover-up. There's also the tantalizing possibility that someone wants Willow to look guilty. The shooter's silhouette resembling her could easily be deliberate, a frame job by someone who knows how to weaponize perception. If so, resurrecting Nell Benson would fit the bill perfectly. No one in Port Charles has ever relished chaos quite like Nell, and framing Willow for attempted murder would be her idea of divine justice. As for the others, Trina, Kai, Alexis, Danny, Elizabeth, even Monica, each name has been floated, none convincingly. The truth is, General Hospital thrives on the slow burn. The inconsistencies in the weather, the unlocked back door, the puddle that shouldn't exist, all these tiny details are breadcrumbs leading to a reveal likely reserved for November sweeps. Until then, all eyes remain on Michael. Whether he's a witness, an accomplice, or a manipulative puppet master remains to be seen. But one thing's certain, he knows far more than he's saying. And in Port Charles, silence is always the loudest confession of all. The biggest criminals in Port Charles don't hide in the shadows. They wear badges. It takes a special kind of soap opera absurdity to turn every criminal investigation into a family reunion. But the Port Charles Police Department, PCPD, has made it an art form. The latest debacle? Detective Harrison Chase, resident himbo in a badge, being assigned to investigate a crime involving his own household. Apparently, the writer's definition of conflict of interest is as loose as the department's grasp on the law. Let's start with the obvious. Chase is living under the same roof as the suspect. Yet, instead of recusing himself, as any competent officer would, he eagerly volunteers to search his own living room for a murder weapon. How thoughtful! Nothing screams objective policing like rummaging through your own couch cushions for evidence. One almost expects Michael to stroll in, tuck the incriminating gun into a bread box, and whistle his way past Chase's half-hearted investigation. This isn't the first time PCPD's ethics have evaporated on cue. The entire department seems to exist for one purpose: to shield Port Charles' Holy Quartet, Michael, Sonny, Jason, and Carly, from consequence. Corruption doesn't even cover it. Complicity might. From Dante turning a blind eye to Sonny's crimes to Chase sweeping his loved one's misdeeds under the rug, the blue line in Port Charles is less thin and more frayed beyond recognition. The absurdity deepens when you realize there are, at most, two functioning detectives in this fictional city, Chase and Dante. Both are neck-deep in personal entanglements with their suspects. Dante, brother to one, Chase, husband to another. And yet, both are entrusted with impartial investigations, under the watchful eye of a police chief who, when she's not inexplicably handling every field assignment herself, is apparently the only person in the department without a family tie to the accused. Meanwhile, veterans like Max Scorpio have vanished into the narrative ether, presumably to recover from the exhaustion of being the only adult in the room. Detective Taggart? Disposed of the minute his paternity status shifted out of relevance. The once capable Detective Bennett, last seen training Dex and looking like he had potential, was also unceremoniously deleted from the storyline, leaving behind a force so hollow it echoes. Even Brennan's dialogue can't escape the nonsense. His casual reference to violating international laws suggests the writers have graduated from ignoring local police procedure to rewriting global jurisprudence. The tragedy of it all is that this could have been the perfect opportunity to introduce fresh blood. A new detective unconnected to the city's endless web of DNA and drama. Perhaps even a competent female officer who could restore a trace of professionalism to the department. But instead, the show insists on recycling the same two detectives, both morally compromised and narratively exhausted, until the badge itself loses meaning. At this point, Port Charles might as well admit what it's become. A small-town soap where every citizen is related, every crime is personal, and every law is optional. The PCPD doesn't need a new case file. It needs an exorcism. Rory Gibson is grateful for his time on Y&R and eager to see how Noah's unfinished stories unfold. When Rory Gibson left the role of Noah Newman on The Young and the Restless in 2023, fans weren't quite ready to say goodbye. But now, the character's story is continuing with Days of Our Lives alum Lucas Adams stepping in, giving Noah a brand new chapter in Genoa City. Gibson, who has since moved over to General Hospital as Michael, recently opened up about what it's like seeing another actor take on a role that helped shape the early part of his daytime career. In a new interview, he reflected on the past, embraced the future, and hinted at the storylines he's excited to see unfold. Gibson spoke to Soap Opera Digest about his reaction to Adams stepping in. "I was actually late to finding out," he stated, recalling how the news reached him. He shared that shortly after hearing it, he went to the movies with Joshua and Crew Morrow and joked with Joshua about having a new son on the show. For Gibson, there's no bad blood, only excitement for what's ahead. He said everyone behind the scenes had nothing but great things to say about Adams. From what he'd heard, the newcomer is talented, kind, and ready to make the role his own. Gibson emphasized that his time at Y&R left him with a lot of affection for the cast and crew, and felt there was more of Noah's tale to tell. "I love all my people over at Y&R," he shared. Gibson explained that he's genuinely curious to see where the character goes from here, especially when it comes to Noah's dynamic with his parents, friends, and old flame. There's one storyline Gibson is especially eager to watch play out again: Noah and Audra. "I especially want to know what's going to happen with Noah and Audra," he admitted. Their on-screen connection was heating up just before his exit, and it's a thread he hopes gets picked up with Adams in the role. While being written out of the show was tough at first, Gibson said he now sees it as a turning point. He remembered feeling disappointed to leave people he genuinely loved working with, but also acknowledged that Noah's storyline had stalled. That open door made it possible for him to join GH, a move he now considers the right fit. "If that hadn't happened, then I probably would never have landed here," he said, adding that playing Michael has brought him real creative fulfillment. For Gibson, everything unfolded exactly how it was meant to, and he'll always have a soft spot for the role that started it all. Here's what's up next in Port Charles. General Hospital spoilers for the week of October 13 to 17, 2025. Tease a villain's new play and a couple's uncertain future. Sidwell's reign of terror on Port Charles has taken a back seat since Drew's shooting and Monica's death. But come Tuesday, the villain is back in action and is ready to throw his power around. He's still on the back of Sonny's mind, who is certain he's behind the judge's untimely death and is left on high alert on Monday. Now, it's finally time to get back to Port Charles mob war between Sonny and Sidwell. Meanwhile, now that the PCPD have received security footage of Nina that crumbles Willow's alibi in Drew's shooting, Nina will be left to pick of the pieces of her lies on Tuesday. At the same time, after Drew presses Willow, he'll most likely make her believe the worst of Michael, who just allowed her to finally see her children. Michael's true intentions after his sketchy behavior are still unknown, but whatever they are, they'll most likely target Drew, not Willow. As for Curtis and Portia, whose pregnancy is still a secret, the pair will discuss the future they may or may not have together. At the same time, Trina and Kai are left playing detective. Elsewhere in Port Charles, the back from the dead, Nathan will have questions for his former PCPD partner, Dante, while a captive Rick will dream about Elizabeth. Dark Michael is out for revenge. On the October 10th, 2025 episode of General Hospital, we finally found out why Michael was creeping around Elizabeth's house, and it all involved Willow. Everyone except Elizabeth noticed Michael's strange behavior when he showed up at her house. He looked around the premises as he walked inside, then asked to see Willow. When Willow finally arrived, he informed her that he would allow her to see the kids. Granted, the visits were supervised by a family therapist. Now, after the PCPD learned that Willow's alibi has crumbled, Anna showed up at Elizabeth's house with a search warrant. Despite for Rick to return her call, Elizabeth finally noticed that Anna was holding piece of evidence before she asked where her current housemate was. If the piece of evidence Anna discovered is Edward's gun, it's safe to assume Michael planted it in Elizabeth's house with the sole purpose of framing his ex-wife. And he's letting her see her kids one last time before she's sent to prison. General Hospital spoilers for October 13th reveal that Drew will try to manipulate Willow, once again trying to turn her against Michael, despite what she believes is him extending an olive branch and letting her see the kids. Except this time, Drew's theory about Michael may actually be correct. At the time of Anna's arrival, Portia was at Elizabeth's house, in need of a friend after receiving the life-changing news that she was, in fact, pregnant. And not just that, she revealed to Elizabeth that there's a chance Curtis isn't the father. But only Portia and Isaiah know about their secret hookups. It sure looks like the walls are closing in on General Hospital's Michael, as the cops are closing in on him as the prime suspect in Drew's shooting. Then there's Drew himself, who is out for blood after having been cut out of Monica's will. Of course, so was Michael. And as Tracy pointed out, he's Monica and Alan's only biological descendant, so maybe Drew should take a step back and breathe for once. Rory Gibson spoke with Raleigh Durham's ABC 11 to talk a bit about all things Michael, and when asked point-blank if Michael shot Drew, his response was certainly interesting. "I don't think he'd be necessarily opposed," the actor hedged, "but I don't know. You're going to have to stay tuned and see what happens." But how Michael feels towards and interacts with Drew and Willow is just about the opposite of how Gibson feels towards their portrayers, Cameron Matheson and Caitlin McMullen. "I'm having a blast," Michael's portrayer shared. "I really, really am. First off, just working with Cam and Katie is always a joy." He goes on to make clear that they're unbelievably kind, sweet, generous humans, which kind of makes it all the more fun to play those kinds of scenes with them. That is always good to hear, especially when actors play characters who just really get under the viewer's skin. And while Gibson won't admit whether or not Michael shot Drew or give a hint as to if he'll stay out of prison, he does share that, "I definitely want to keep trekking down this route of chaos, I guess. Just because it keeps it fun, it keeps it interesting. I definitely want him to have some happiness and love in his life as well. But it's a soap. We've got to keep it exciting. I like the route we're on right now and hope we stay on that route." Love would certainly be good. And at this point, it's probably best if Michael found it with someone new, and without the baggage of someone like Willow, even if they do share kids together. As for what's coming in the next few weeks, a whole lot of chaos and a whole lot of angst, Gibson shared with ABC 11. He then added with a laugh, "And a lot of brooding, I guess. Check out the full interview below."